going to the Starbucks in the middle of the Pentagon, super fun, was the first time. And then you do it every day. And you see this, people that are planning invasions in Venezuela. And I'm like, this just doesn't feel good. And it's not what I want.
Hi, I'm Dave Weich, and you're listening to Work-Shaped Life. So much depends on timing. I talked to Katie Fine on a Tuesday night in January from my home in Portland, Oregon. She was at home in D.C. A few hours earlier, she left the Pentagon on her last day of work at the Department of War. That was all news to me, though. When we'd scheduled this interview a month earlier, she hadn't mentioned plans to quit. She quit. Clocking out of a job for the last time. Whether you quit or you got fired, you're in a heightened state. I remember leaving one job elated, closing the door behind me on a sunny summer day. At a previous job, though, a bar where I'd managed for years, the new manager made me clock out 2 hours early because, he said, pulling out the cash drawer in front of our staff and customers, he didn't trust me with the till. And that was at a bar. Katie walked out of the Pentagon. But wait, how does a person with a PhD in archeology who's digging for antiquities in Greece end up in D.C. at the Department of War?
So my name is Katie Fine. I currently live in Washington, D.C. I, as of today, am a former employee of the Department of War. But yeah, my background, I have a PhD in archaeology. I have lived and worked all over the world. And I'm kind of in a big career transition right now, ongoing for the past couple of years. And yeah, I grew up in Evanston, a suburb of Chicago. I um, went to college, went immediately to grad school, was in school for most of my life, finished my PhD during COVID, defended when I was 31. Nope, 33. And yeah, I've just been like working, trying to find my forever home, whatever that means. And now I'm in DC.
What is the job you just left? What were you doing?
I was a I was a fellow in for the Department of Defense or Department of War, depending on how you feel about name changes.
How does a person with a background in archaeology, what is the connection there?
I feel like to answer that question, I have to kind of rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So when I was finishing up my dissertation, I was at Florida State was where I was doing my PhD. And a friend of a friend worked for the Department of Defense doing in an agency called the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency. That entire department within the DoD, what they do is they go out and they try and recover remains of service members who were lost in foreign conflicts. Mostly Vietnam era,
Uh-huh.
less so World War II, but that's um an entire branch of the DoD. And a friend of a friend worked there and said, we're hiring a forensic archaeologist. My PhD is in Neolithic ceramics from the Mediterranean. That's where I went to Greece every summer, excavated in Greece, super early stuff, was really interested in sort of social processes and things for the Neolithic period in Greece. But I also really am fascinated by World War II. And so
Okay.
my friend said, this is super random, but apply for this job. I think you'd really love working here. And so I did. It all worked out. I ended up moving to Hawaii in August of 2020, and so I was already working for the DoD. I did that for 2 years. So I
Yeah.
went out to Vietnam and to Laos and was the only civilian, sort of like the archaeologist in charge of these groups of military teams that were going out excavating, trying to recover the remains of American service members. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went back to Greece for 2 years, and I was the assistant director of a research institute there. And then I decided, I really need and I want to have some more stability. I had always kind of thought about foreign service as something. I knew that I didn't want to stay in academia. I found this fellowship. I think they really liked that I had a background already with the DoD, so I knew how to work with, you know, people within the military bureaucracy. I think that was really was attractive to them, that I had that background, but also that I had been in academia for many years. And because we do work with a lot of academics in that office. The stuff I was doing had nothing to do with my background in archaeology, but was more about the other experiences that I had cobbled together
Right.
through my kind of funky career path.
So, okay, 1,000 questions, but um, what was your, I don't know, emotional and or intellectual reaction to the idea of, I have gone through a PhD program. I've been dedicated to this line of work, and now I'm not very old. In your 30s.
Late 30s.
Not very old. Certainly not. Like still barely mid-career age. Um, and you're taking a left turn. How did that? It obviously appealed to you enough to do it, but what did that feel like? What that kind of question?
I mean, honestly, kind of devastating, in a lot of ways. I I think that my career path when I realized that I didn't wanna stay in academia and that I didn't for and I didn't wanna stay in academia, and I also knew that academia didn't want me to stay in it. Like, the
Hmm.
job market for archaeologists is abysmal. This year, for example, I have friends that are on the job market. I have friends that have been on the academic job market for 10, 15 years that are brilliant, smarter than I will ever be, have really fascinating research, and just will never get a job because the jobs don't exist. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And when I moved to Hawaii, like, I never thought I would stay there for a long time. It was just sort of like, this is what I'm doing. And because it was archaeology, I mean, it was straight up going out and doing excavations, the research questions are completely different. You don't have a research question when you're going out to look for a guy.
Right.
The question is, can we find something to give back to his family? Yes or no?
Right.
Um, but again, because I was like out there digging in the dirt, like living my like having adventures, I didn't feel like I was kind of leaving anything behind in that way.
Hmm.
And, when I decided to go back to Greece, it was like, well, I'm not going to be doing field work, but I'm going to be the assistant director of this overseas research institute where where I was a grad student, basically. It was a non-permanent position. It was 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Um, and so I always knew it wasn't forever. And then when I moved to DC in the summer of 2024 to start this fellowship, I thought, okay, like now I really am kind of starting a career. And then, of course, the election happened, and the federal government has been exploded in a way that we've never experienced in US history. Um, and this isn't true for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But for me, I cannot stay even adjacently to this government. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be like super political, but like I've just figured out that like there's certain lines that I don't want to cross. Like
Yeah.
even though I do nothing to do when I was at the DoD, like I had nothing to do with like current events really, but just
Yeah.
like the like constant feeling of like, I mean, like I worked in the Pentagon. Like that was cool for like 2 weeks walking in the Pentagon every day. And then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is just life. This is just like, everything becomes sort of the mundane. Going to the Starbucks in the middle of the Pentagon, super fun, like the first time. And then
Right.
you do it every day and you're like, and you see people that are planning invasions in Venezuela. And I'm like, this just doesn't feel good. And it's not what I want. Because I think if you had asked me when I first started my PhD program, I'd be like, I'm going to be a professor
Hmm.
and I'm going to be at an R1 university and I'm going to have graduate students and this is what I'm going to have. And then I think, I just realized that that life wasn't what I wanted and nor was it something that was attainable anymore. I mean, maybe
Right.
in 1995 it was, but it's just not in our modern world. So, yeah, I guess I'm still I think I said devastated when we first started talking about this because made a decision to kind of pivot away from archaeology proper, and I'm still trying to figure out if I regret that or not.
Right.
Um,
When you well, like, what attracted you to archaeology in the first place? Maybe you thought that, a career as a professor was more sustainable, like, but why archaeology? What drove you in that direction?
I really like figuring out things about other people. I'm a nosy person.
But you're talking
Um,
about people who lived a long, long time ago. You don't mean
yeah.
like your neighbor.
Well, I think that that's, like, what's so incredible about the longue durée of human history, is that, like, at the end of the day, we're doing the same stuff. We're filling our hours. We're having babies. We're finding shelter. We're going to work. We're figuring out what happiness means. All of this has been happening since we were Neanderthals. Like,
Right.
it's the same thing, and it's just, like, I love that feeling of connection, I think
Yeah.
is so magical, and knowing just, like, connecting the dots for things, answering questions, um, I think I grew up going to, like, the Field Museum
uh
and going to a lot of museums that had, like, Egypt exhibits and, really great collections of, like, statues and stuff, and I would look at them and I would stare at them and just be like, I would try to imagine what it was like when somebody was making it, and I just thought it was so cool to try and be like, "Okay, like, somebody sat there and painted this vase
Uh-huh.
3,000 years ago." Like, it's just, like, mind-blowing and I just loved that, and I was kinda got addicted to just, like, thinking in that way of, like, human action, I guess.
I'm curious because what you're describing is a sense of connectivity, a sense of like we are all this is one big long procession of humans, and yet is there an element in that for you of escapism too? I wonder. I mean, you are at the same time living it. You're like, no, we're not going to talk about anything that's going on right now. We're going to be in Greece.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I That's such a good point. I love that because I've just been talking to my friends recently about escapism and about how because of course all of us have been watching this gay hockey show and we're like, why are all of us having this mass psychosis event of like every single person I know is just like, and I'm like, oh, because we're all just trying to escape the horrific world that we live in. And it's like this comfortable, great thing that we can just like go wrap ourselves in. And I have never thought about archaeology as that, but that's exactly what that was for me. I mean, yeah, it's the way like the thing that I wanted to keep like wrapping myself in so that I, could kind of not have to think about math or whatever the hell other subjects in school I didn't want to do.
Right. If you're agreeing to go to Greece or Hawaii, on the one hand, those are very kind of romantic destinations. On the other hand, there is a great amount of uprooting in that. There is a sense of like you are not entirely in control of
Mhm.
your life. Did you just think, I'm young, this is the time to do it? Do you like how did that factor into the whole equation of this is what you chose to do?
Um, that's a great question because I actually was such a homebody when I was a kid. Like, I used to have terrible, like, separation anxiety, even going to, like, summer camp. Like, I would be away from my mom, and, like, I would be fine once I got there, but I would just be, like, this period of, like, I don't like, I hated being away from home. And then, I did my first excavation actually just at a Native American site in Southern Illinois, so I didn't travel very far, but I was out there. And then this summer, I was in college and I went to Greece for the first time, and it was actually really scary and really difficult. And my mom was really sick while I was gone, and I remember just, like, thinking, like, "I'm gonna go, like, be in this thing that, like in this challenging environment for me." Um, I think other people might not have had the same, like, reaction to it, but, like, I went to college in my hometown. Like, I went to Northwestern. I never really, like, went very far until I went to Greece.
Uh-huh.
Um, and actually, this is very interesting because 'cause I've never really, like, tried to pull apart, like, sort of but the summer after I went to Greece for the first time, my mom died,
Oh.
and so I had this, like, period where it was, like, the worst thing that I could think of happened, and I wonder if I kind of used that as a, like, I don't know, a catalyst to just kind of, like, go see other things and go
Mhm.
be like, "Okay." Like, I was so scared to leave her, and now I can do this, like, I immediately started, um, I went to France for 6 months after I graduated from college, which was about a year after she died. I I did like, I'd always really loved to travel, but I
Mhm.
was always sort of, like, tethered back to Evanston, tethered
Mhm.
back to my home, and I think not having that tether really let me be like, "I love this." Like,
Mhm.
I want to see everything, and, like, I think there's probably some escapism in it. I think there's this, like, incredible sense of adventure of, like, you know, going and doing this thing that not everybody gets to do,
Yeah.
um, and just being like, "This is what makes me happy, and I'm gonna keep trying to do it." Um, Archeology also, I should say, is, like, extremely it's very problematic in a lot of ways, and especially limited to people who can afford to go abroad, and so it's, like, another aspect of archeology that I think is really frustrating, and I ended up taking on a lot of student debt for that, which is another reason that I kind of wanted to pivot careers is because 'cause I'm like, "Well, shit, I'm 38 years old, and I have so many student loans now." Choosing I guess it's just sort of like choosing what made me happy in this way when I was pretty young. I mean, I was 21, obviously, like, graduated college and started thinking about grad school and just, like yeah, I almost feel like I had this period where I was almost, like, addicted to just going out and finding new things and,
Mhm.
like, going on excavations, trying to travel as much as possible. I did my MA in London. When I was doing my PhD, I was attached to a couple of digs in Greece, in Croatia. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot more of an emotional component for me. I wonder what other archaeologists would say, but definitely for me, I think it's a sense of freedom and excitement and that I was kind of chasing for a long time.
Mhm. I mean, it's a heck of a lot more adventurous than most people's work lives. You're working, I presume, in Hawaii with, like, very different kinds of people probably,
Yeah.
right? Like, and what was that just on a personal level? Did you easily make friends? Were you lonely? Like, what is that like to shift so radically and move to a completely different part of the world?
It was really wild, and it was during COVID. So, like, I moved and I had to immediately do a 2-week quarantine when I landed in Hawaii. It was just me. Thank God for, like, modern technology because I was just, like, on FaceTime with people all day for 2 weeks when I moved there. But yeah, it's I had never been to Hawaii before I moved there.
Well,
I worked on the Pearl Harbor Hickam Joint Air Force Base, so that was wild. I'd never been on a military base before, and it was the work environment was a very again, because it was COVID, it was super weird
yeah.
because there weren't very many people in the office. I was going in, I think 2 or 3 times a week, but we had staggered things, so I didn't really meet very many people right away. Deciding to up and move your life, which I've done several times now, is really hard, especially as, like, a single person. I did it when I went to grad school a couple of times, but when you do an academic program, you have, like, a group of people that are like, you're gonna know them, you're gonna be in classes together, whatever. When I moved to Hawaii, it was just like, well, here I am. And it was tough. It was really lonely for a lot of the time. But once we were back in the office more, and especially once I started, we were able to go on missions. So, like, I was able to go to Vietnam and Laos. Like, that was incredible because especially when I was in Laos, we were base camping, so we were just in tents for 2 months with each other, with people. It was mostly people from in the military and all the branches,
Mhm.
um, and there were, you know, like any kind of mixed group of people, you there's lots of conflict, there's lots of crazy things, but, like, I had a blast, like, it was an amazing experience, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them. Being in Hawaii, though, was tough. Like, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like, you're in a rock in the middle of the Pacific, like, the closest family I had is in Portland, and it would take 5, 6 hours to fly there, so,
Right.
like, it was crazy, and I felt pretty isolated out there.
Right. What is that like? I mean, I have to imagine the emotional investment in actually there are families
Mhm.
that are going to be meaningfully affected by the outcome of your work. It's a little different than digging for some again in antiquity.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that was very different, and that was something that I hadn't anticipated as being so different, because I just didn't really think about it. I was like, "It's archeology, I'm going to be going out," and then, the first time we go out when I was in Vietnam, and we were digging in a rice paddy, so the circumstances of the loss was that a plane had crashed during the Vietnam War, and there was one loss, this guy that we were looking for, and enough time has passed that his parents had died, but I think his siblings were still alive.
Mhm.
And we're waiting for answers, like that kind of thing. And we also it was such an interesting experience because we're looking for our guy. We're literally, digging up this rice paddy, which was in itself such a different environment than I've ever had to work in.
Yeah.
Like, we had to figure out how to, like, dam a rice paddy so that we could, like, drain it and stuff. So there's that. We're disrupting the whole ecosystem of this tiny little village by doing this. Um, we're in a tiny little village that was itself bombarded during the Vietnam War by the enemy soldiers who were Americans. So there's, like, all sorts of sort of social issues that we were dealing with that I've never experienced when I'm in Greece, obviously.
Right.
Like, there's local interest whenever you're doing an excavation in Greece, but, like, people find pottery constantly in Greece. People find stuff all like, they're not it's not the same thing as, like, you know, this event that happened 50 years ago that people who are around there and they would come out and sometimes they would watch us dig. We had a lot of local people that were volunteers and would help us, go through back dirt because you're literally sifting through the circumstances of loss were such that like we're looking for pieces of crania because an explosion,
Uh-huh.
and that's what we were kind of finding. But you're asking these people, these local Vietnamese people, yes, they're being paid, but like we're asking them to basically help us dig up somebody who was actively trying to kill them.
Right.
And
And they were kill them. I mean, so this might have been like a child at the time.
yeah, you'd see we had these 2 guys that would come by, these 2 older Vietnamese guys that would come and kinda stand and watch us. Um, and one of our, translators, like, went up and talked to them one day and then, like, 'cause we asked, like, "What's the deal with those guys?" And they were like, "Oh, they remember the plane crash." And I
Wow.
was like, "Oh, okay." Like, yeah. Um
Yeah.
It's that part of what I was doing had definitely a different emotional toll. We were
Hmm.
still trying to have a good time, but, like, there is this sort of overarching, like, we're out here to find our guy, and that's heavy.
And
Um,
how long would you spend looking for that one person, for instance?
the one in that circumstance, we did one excavation, so that was about 7 weeks,
Oh.
and they sent out another team after us to try and get more. Um And, there's a lot of talk about should we really be spending time and money, especially like taxpayers' money, to go and
Yeah.
be like looking for these guys when a lot of times, especially World War II losses, there's nobody still alive that really, they'll do honorable carries for, their great nephew who had no connection to
Right.
this person. Vietnam is still a little bit closer, but the reason that DPAA, that's, I mean, acronyms on acronyms in the military, exists is because the mothers and wives of Vietnam casualties and MIA POWs demanded that Congress fulfill the promise of bringing them back, that,
Uh-huh.
no man left behind is the thing. And so I think it's still an important mission, but it is something that we think about, that I thought about kind of when I was there, that was like spending millions of dollars to find like one person,
Right.
maybe. Because,
Right.
you often, there's nothing to find.
Right.
Um, but, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a very important thing that we do, given how much how much money we spend to
Yeah.
kill other people. So,
So you're at this very did you know when we made this date that you were going to give notice? Had you already given notice at your job?
I had been offered the job.
Okay.
And I hadn't given notice yet, but I was like, yeah, I mean, this is my career and work and stuff is something that I've been thinking about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the past couple of months. So,
Yeah.
yes, when we made the date, I knew that I would be giving notice. I didn't know like that today would have been my last day of work.
Right. And so what are you do you know what you're doing next then? You've taken another job?
Yeah, so I'm going to be working for Yale University in New Haven, doing helping them to coordinate sort of government policies to make sure that their researchers aren't gonna get dinged for anything, and that they'll still be, able to get grants and things like that from the government, but also teaching them the importance of research security and, like, why it's a thing, why it's a bipartisan effort, why it exists in our world, that kinda stuff. So, um, yeah, and again, I mean, this is because I accepted this job, I kind of, you know, have been having a lot of really, like, long, difficult conversations with myself about, I'm getting farther and farther away from archeology, and so and, like, that kind of I feel like I'm kind of closing the door on one part of my life as I'm going into another, and that's been difficult.
You were in a position where you actively, it sounds like, wanted to leave this job. How did you think about like, was it like, "I'm taking any job I can get"? What were the qualifications that were going to be meaningful to you in finding and choosing a new job?
I was terrified that I would never find another job, and I thought, "I have such a niche set of skills," you know, if I felt like I didn't have very many options. I had top secret clearance, so, like, that's helpful, but with what the government was doing, everybody on the job market in DC is clearance. Like, it's not, it used to be something, in normal times, it's like, "Oh, you can get another job."
Uh-huh.
But then I was like, "I don't know if I want to be somebody, like, that has a job that requires clearance anymore. Like, that
Right.
sucks. I don't." And so I was, going through things and I was like, "What do I want?" And I've been in therapy for a very long time, so, like, this is something that I've talked about with my therapist a lot about, you know, defining things, defining who I am, if not an archaeologist. Like, what is my what are my career goals?
Mhm.
I don't know if I really, like, have answers yet, but it's something that I've been struggling with every day of, like, when you're in an academic field, especially one like archaeology, it's like it's been my whole identity since I was, like, 20 years old, 18, whenever I started, declared my major. And so it's been really scary and difficult to be even asking myself those questions of, like, what am I looking for in a job? Is it all about salary? Is it about, like, work-life balance? Um, I'm a single woman in my late 30s with a cat. Like, I don't necessarily have, like, the things that, like, my friends, for example, have as important check marks are just not applicable to me. And then my friends that are still in the academic world and still in the archaeology world, I feel like I also don't relate to anything that they're looking for because that's just not the life that I'm in anymore. So I felt like I've kind of been in this weird liminal space of, like, who am I? What do I want out of my life?
Yeah.
And I've kind of, decided that, like, I w I want to work for a place that I don't hate, like, that I don't have, like, a moral objection to.
Uh-huh.
I want to have good benefits, like financial benefits, but also, like, retirement, health care and stuff, which, like, in academia, you don't get. Like, until I got my first job, working for DPAA was the first time I had ever had a 401k, because when you're a grad student, you just don't have that, and it doesn't even enter into your mind
Mhm.
to be, like, to question that. And so, I guess I wanted to be able to have time to pursue things that are important to me, like traveling and spending time with my friends and my family, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to come back to the States when I was living in Greece. It was like, you know, felt very far away from people. I one of the major things that I've been dealing with is like the sense of regret um about my decisions and jobs that I've taken and jobs that I've left, especially. At the time, I left those jobs because all of the reasons made sense to me. It's
Right.
just maybe this is just part of growing up and, like, understanding that things change and your feelings about things change, and I'm making decisions with the best, with what I have the best tools to make the
Yeah.
decisions. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel a lot of the times like I'm kind of flying blind because I just
Yeah.
I don't have, like, a checklist.
You've had, I think, a lot more highs and lows than a typical person does in the first whatever phase or 2 of their career. I mean, people have highs and lows, but they don't necessarily, spend years in Athens or in Hawaii. Like, you have had the adventures, and,
Yeah.
whether those adventures sort of fulfilled your vision of them or not, I it's almost as if the question is like, what do you need? Can you be satisfied without adventure?
I don't know. That's a great question. I realize I haven't had a job for more than 2 years at a time. I've moved every 2 years for the past 10 years, um, and, like, moved continents.
Right.
I was in Florida for grad school. I was in Greece for 2 years during my dissertation. I went back to Florida. I went to Hawaii. I went to Greece. I came back to DC. Like, I am tired, but I'm also, like, I am afraid that I'm never gonna be. I think this is, there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm never gonna be satisfied unless I'm just, like, running around.
Yeah. Do you think that's common? I mean, do you like, again, like when you're out with, I think more of Greece because I'm guessing that the crew you were with was a little bit more aligned with um, your background. Do you feel like you fit in there? Do you feel like you were among your people, or was it still there that did you feel a bit of an alien?
I think no, I definitely, like, those are my people.
Yeah.
Like, I think other archaeologists, especially not even just archaeologists, but people that study the ancient world, like, I I we have the best conversations.
Hmm.
We have, I have wonderful friendships like that. I think that where I didn't feel like I fit was in my, you know, like, maybe not fit, but, like, I didn't have the patience to do adjunct positions. I didn't have the desire or the means to make that work.
When you think about the happiest you've ever been at work, what day comes to mind?
Oh god. Um, I got to give a tour of the Acropolis and the Agora to Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Wow.
That was incredible. Um, the stuff that I've gotten to do like that, where it's like, "What?" I found a really cool floor once,
Okay.
like, from the Roman period. It was mosaic, like, that was pretty cool.
So
But,
this
like,
was like you had unearthed some sort of structure that was actually you
yeah,
dug to the floor.
it was part of a large Roman villa, and we were like, "Oh, there's the floor."
Wow.
I loved teaching because when I was a grad student, we were the teachers in order to get paid. Um, but I don't know if there's one moment. I mean, I guess like my dissertation, like finishing my PhD was an incredible moment that was also kind of stolen by COVID because it was all on Zoom. Um, but it's like I guess like those highs of like where I've worked so hard for something and can check it off and can be like, yes, like I am a doctor of archaeology, or like I am explaining the Parthenon to a Supreme Court justice. Like I never felt that level of like connected excitement when in the past few years, like at DoD at all.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of begs the question for me of like, is that just what work is? If it's not somebody's whole identity? Because I think, people find fulfillment from other things other than work, and that's what I'm working
Right.
on, is finding
Right.
fulfillment in my life when I'm not an archaeologist. I wonder if what I'm doing now is gonna scratch the itch or if I'm gonna end up leaving again in 2 years, but we'll see.
Work-Shaped Life is produced by the team at Sheepscot Creative. It's hosted by me, Dave Weich, edited by Bailey Cain and Michael Nipper, with production support from Benna Gottfried, Rosie Struve, Amelia Lukas, and Kate Sokoloff. Next time on Work-Shaped Life.
I have yet to encounter a student in the last 10 years who is satisfied with the world and looks out at it and feels comfortable and anticipatory and hopeful. And so a big question is, what do I do with all this fear? And what do I do with the question of how do I, small person, figure out not just how to navigate in these conditions, but change these conditions?
Visit workshapedlife.com to find every episode and say hello. Or even better, tell us a story about your own work-shaped life. Maybe we'll feature it on the podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to hear new episodes as they drop. Thanks for listening.